Arthur Poznanski in London, England. What happened after you got to Piotrków?
Before I tell you that, I just wanted to mention, I don't know at what stage we got to know that the vans which were taken, Jews from Wieluń, were actually bound for a camp called Chełmno. And it transpired that this was a, what they call Vernichtungslager, which means a death camp. But the vans apparently were the first prototypes of mobile gas chambers. So quite obviously, quite a lot of people who were herded in there arrived as corpses and just simply had to be buried, although apparently not all of them. But I don't remember at what stage this knowledge came to us. However, when we came to Piotrków, we found ourselves in the street. We came out of the railway station, and the streets were very busy. Life was in the Polish sector, and we were thinking of how to get into the ghetto. And we saw a Jew with a Star of David on his garment. So obviously he was one of those who was working somewhere in the Polish sector officially, and we approached him and he said, for goodness sake, don't even speak to me here, but I'll tell you what, if you want to enter the ghetto, the best way is to join a party of people coming from work back into the ghetto. But first of all, you have to get yourself a couple of Stars of David and put on the back and front of your clothes, because otherwise you'll be arrested immediately. And he says, I'll get them for you. So I don't remember how much we paid him for it, but he went and got for us, we had to trust somebody anyway, the Stars of David, which we pinned on our clothes, and we waited till we saw a column of workers going from one of the glass factories into the ghetto, and we simply joined them and entered the ghetto with no problem, no trouble. Of course, when we came, the joy was great from my brothers, my father and grandparents, but it's not only my grandparents. You see, everybody was herded into the ghetto the same way as we had condensed our living quarters in the Wieluń ghetto. They were having condensed accommodation in the Piotrków ghetto. So never mind how influential anybody would have been, they still had my grandparents living there, my two brothers and my father, and another aunt of mine with her husband and two sons, and the third aunt was still living all in the same apartment. So of course when my grandma saw us, the first thing is, where are you going to sleep? You know, where shall I put you? And it was decided that she would lay a straw bag in the kitchen for the night for me to sleep with one of my youngest brother, while my mother should join my father, you know, in one of the bedrooms and so on. But at least we brought home some German marks and money, so it wasn't too bad. We had some food to start with, not much of it, but even at whatever price, it was very difficult to get on the black market. The scarcest commodity was bread. My poor brothers were really starved, and my greatest joy was when we went out, you know, into the street and I could get them a little roll, something that we were still selling in the street. at a very great price. You know, I could get them a roll each, and they ate it before I could even give it to them. So, but money was running out of course very quickly. To start with, I was quite happy in the Piotrków ghetto. And very soon I made friends with a lot of Jewish youth. And I didn't realize they were called the Golden Youth because they were from affluent parents, most of them, and they had plenty of time. There was no work to be done, and used to go about reading and reciting poetry. There were a lot of girls and boys, and I used to play the mouse organ, which of course made me quite popular in the things. I used to sing songs and discuss things generally. But of course, eventually we could meet only after curfew, because during the daytime, you see, it wasn't easy. Everybody had their own things to deal with. But soon I think I arranged it that for them to sort of vault through various garden fences and go between one garden to the other garden, the third garden, jump across the street, and you find yourself in the place where you want to be, where we can gather. And we gather in somebody's back garden one night or one evening, and in somebody else's the next evening. And we really had quite a good time with it, thinking that we can fool the Germans, you know, and we are still in charge of our destiny. Unfortunately, it was not to be, because very soon we heard rumors that Częstochowa was being dealt with, so to speak, and Jews were being deported. And other places, Warsaw and what, it bothered us tremendously, because we just couldn't fathom where all these Jews were going. Thousands and thousands of them were driven eastwards, but nobody ever came back, and nobody sent any messages. But never mind how much people were saying, well, they are going to destruction, they are all being killed off by the Germans one way or another, electrocuted or gassed, or, you know, there are various theories. But who could believe that? I mean, who could give credit that you could take people, a whole mass of people, and just murder them for no other reason, for no reason at all really, but for no other reason that they were Jews? It just didn't register. We couldn't credit it. Even though we had signs that it could be true, we still wouldn't believe it. So people, in the meantime, there were little pogroms being arranged by the Germans. Some Jewish holidays, they demanded 20 people as sacrifices, you know, to be shot at the local cemetery and things like that. And eventually there were rumors that whoever is working in the factories which produce goods for the use of the German economy, German army, will be spared from the deportation wherever they are going, eastward, westwards, but at least you will stay in your own place. That was the time when my parents decided to sell their jewelry, bribe whoever it was to be bribed, whether it was a German official or a Polish official who had influence, and got my brother and myself a secure place in one of the factories, which was the glass furnace. It was actually a compound of two different factories which were united under one directorship. One was called Hortensia and the other Cara. One produced mainly jars and bottles, but apart from that they also produced luxury goods, carafes and crystals and special articles. But their main produce was glass bottles and jars for the German army. And the other factory, Cara, produced mainly plate glass, sheets of plate glass. And of course we found employment on Hortensia. Eventually I wrote a little story about how I got my impression on Hortensia, but it's a bit too long now to dwell on it. But it was my first experience of manual work among Polish workers, the rough crowd, under German supervision, in heavy industry as it was.
Was it inside the ghetto, this factory?
No, the factory was about a mile or so even outside, the Polish perimeter of the, the center of the town. So we had to go through the usually merchant columns, there were two shifts, day shift and night shift. And you were led to our work.
How many of you, do you know? Any idea?
Eventually there were about 700 Jews working in Hortensia and Cara compound, or 750 or something like this. But I don't know how many were working at the time. Within a month or so or two, I think I joined the factory in about June 42.
More Poles than Jews or less?
Yes, definitely. Many more Poles than Jews. And they were the master of the trade. You see, it wasn't a simple type of work, to blow those various glass objects. It was quite a skilled job. Eventually, quite a few, even youngsters, Jews. My brother was one who learned to be a Meister, which means the highest grade, and he was a little fellow who stood there, as skilled glass blower.
This was Jerzy, was it rather?
Jerzy, yeah. So that just goes to prove that not only my parents, but many Jewish parents did the same quite obviously. And instead of saving themselves, they tried to secure a future, if there was to be a future, for at least some of their children.
Was your father working at this time?
My father at the time was working. He was the manager in one of the branches of the sanitary division of the Jewish Council. So he thought that actually he was fairly safe, or he hoped he would be safe. And he based most of his plans on that. Let's put it this way, he hoped he would be saved, and as he be saved, also his wife and my youngest brother. However, one day in October we were told when you come to work with your next shift, bring with you anything you can carry on your back, because you are staying in the factory. You are not going back to the ghetto. You will be staying here for a few days, because the ghetto is going to be evacuated. We were told quite openly. So of course I remember my mother packed me a rucksack and one for my brother. Each of us took a blanket and I still had one of the very good suits, a serge suit, and of course I took with me my collection of postage stamps, which was in my father's leather briefcase, a very beautiful briefcase. And off we went, you know, with as much we thought, well, in a couple of days we come back, you know, to rejoin our families. Little did we know. They kept us there till the 21st of October, which means from 14th to the 21st or whatever, while we were being told that the ghetto was undergoing the process of evacuation, which the German called Aktion. And little did we know what it involved. We were only told about it once we came back. There are apparently scenes of horror, absolute horror. Little babies being chucked out from second-story buildings, women raped by Cossacks whose whole division was working together, cooperating with the Nazis. There were even some Jewish policemen who behaved not better than that. And of course they were the Einsatztruppen, and quite a few people got killed on the way. They were chased into the Sammelplatz, where, you know, they gathered up and pushed into the trains, into cattle trucks, filled to suffocation, and sent to their doom. Well, come what way, we still refuse to believe that it would be their doom. It's a very hard to swallow assumption. But when we came back to the ghetto after the few days, I wanted to go to where our apartment was in the ghetto, and I was told, no, that's not the ghetto anymore. The ghetto has been condensed to just a couple of derelict little streets in the southern part of it, which eventually we called the Little Ghetto or the Block. And there's no use going home. If you want to find anybody, it will be in the Little Ghetto. So I entered the Little Ghetto, and I just didn't know where to go and what to do with myself. At that time, a Jewish policeman, who obviously was bribed to do that, gave me a little scrap of, like, a side of a newspaper on which in pencil was scribbled a note by my mother. We are being taken. Goodbye. May God protect you. And just remember, you are now, or you have to be, a parent as well as a brother to Jerzy, because he is but a child. So take care of him.
Had they not made any plans, your parents? I mean, you were able to tell them, if they didn't know already, that this information that the ghetto was going to be cleared. Had they not taken any precautions to hide? Or
Well, to start with, all people who hid, or most of them who hid, were eventually caught anyway. Where would you hide and where would you go? You see, the trouble with the massacre, or as we call it now, the Holocaust, which took place in Poland, was because of the antagonism of the local population. And inasmuch as you hear about individuals saving a Jewish life or a Jewish family, they were very well bribed for it, or they were friends, or they were, in any case, very few saintly individuals. Most of Poles were simply saying, here the Jews are going for soap, which means that they'll be melted down into soap. And that's all they cared. When they saw Jews being deported, they simply said, oh well, good riddance. Hitler is eventually doing the job we wanted to do for a long time. So where can you run, where can you hide? Who will give you succor in such circumstances? And apart from that, talking about my parents, who quite obviously were quite intelligent and thinking people, maybe, but they thought that because of my father's position, he may be spared, just may. Well, they took a chance. We all really took a chance in whatever we did, because, as you will hear from my story later on, you know, you had to take certain chances, and it either played out or you didn't, but it turned out the whole world is a gamble. What I meant to add, that a time, mainly during my sojourn in Wieluń and during my escape, that we had to rely on something which I call a sixth sense, which warned us of danger, and we really thought, you know, that danger is coming. We should, you know, we sense that danger.
During the week that you were in the factory, what did you do for food and sleeping accommodation?
We were given food, and we were sleeping on a little straw bag which was given to us, placed above the ovens, you know, which was quite warm in one of the part of that factory.
Do you recall any reactions from the Polish people that you were working with, who presumably went home each night just the same and came back during the day, about what was happening, their reactions to it?
Well, first, the reaction was really, I do recall, the reaction was mixed. But most of them were saying, well, good job to the Jews, sort of thing. But others were, you know, feeling really sorry, you know, or pretended to be sorry. It was a mixed reaction. You couldn't generalize it. But I'm quite certain that none of them would give us any help if we wanted to hide or do anything like that.
What would have been either, from your point of view, the chances or the point of trying to get out of the factory back into the ghetto, if anybody had wanted to do that?
You could, which means you would be sent away, and some people chose to actually, says, look, I don't want to stay here, sorry, I want to go back to the ghetto, and they were allowed to go.
They were allowed to go?
Yes.
Would it be your impression that the people in charge knew what was going on, and therefore?
Your guess is as good as mine. Nobody knew. I don't even know the Poles knew. I don't know if all Germans knew.
And where did those trains go to?
Treblinka.
What was your reaction to your mother's note?
Well, considering my age and the situation I was in, I just sat there crying. I didn't know. I eventually had a blackout. I read it and read it again. I still wouldn't believe. And then when I regained some sort of control over myself, I thought to myself, for goodness sake, how am I going to take care of my kid brother? I can't even take care of myself. What am I going to do? We haven't got anybody who is going to help even with advice. So I just sat and cried some more, and the whole world seems to go about in a sort of a whirlwind. I don't know. I was semi-conscious for quite a time.
Was Jerzy with you when this was happening?
No, of course not. He was working a different shift, so he was still in Hortensia. And I was by myself in the ghetto.
Were there other people around you or near you who were in a similar situation, who'd been at the factory and come back to find this desolation?
There must have been. I was not aware of anybody. I was in a... I was drowning.
And then what happened?
Yes, ever since that day I started having nightmares. But eventually, from nowhere, one of my aunt appeared. And that was the one who had 2 children, and her husband was actually a German Jew, and he had a very high position in the council, and they managed to get saved that way. So she came and says, well, we'll try to do for you whatever we can. And then she started telling me, which I wanted to know, the details about the deportation. I don't know how much of it I could take, but it was a terrible tale. It wasn't just straightforward action.
Was she reluctant to tell you?
I'm not sure. She might have been reluctant, but I think also she wanted to get it off her chest. It was important.
Was it an emotional way she was telling the story?
Very. And apparently there was another one of my aunts who survived. And they lived together in a little, one of those apartments. And she said she secured for me a place to live in the same house where she was, in the little block.
You've come to the end of this tape now.